I would say you can't take care of other people if you don't take care of yourself. And so I think investing in yourself, being very protective over what you need allows everybody else to thrive. It's never at the sacrifice of others. And so it is okay to be selfish because it just means you're better for everybody else around you.
Welcome back to the Badass Women in Business podcast. Our guest today is Missy Wright. Missy is a leader in franchise development who has spent more than a decade helping brands grow and guiding people into business ownership. She has worked across several industries, building high-performing development teams and helping launch dozens of new franchise locations. Missy is passionate about helping entrepreneurs create meaningful businesses while balancing leadership, family, and life. She lives in Houston with her husband and 2 young kids and is a proud Green Bay Packers fan. Missy, welcome to the Badass Women in Business podcast. And as we ask all of our guests, tell us how you got here.
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, first of all, thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here. Much like everybody in franchising, I feel like I kind of stumbled into it. I mean, I went to school for a variety of things, sales being one of them, and moved to Houston, took a job that I hated. And so on the weekends, my roommate and I decided it was best interest to paint and drink and have ourselves a great time, and found ourselves at a company called Pinot's Palette. And so on the weeknights, I would peruse LinkedIn looking for any job to get me out of what I was doing, and saw a job opening at Pinot's Palette. And I thought, I know nothing about franchising. Let's figure it out. And so miraculously talked them into giving me a job. And that is where I learned that this entire industry exists, and got to develop processes and talk to people on the phone, and just fell in love with the fact that we get to be a really small piece of a big change in somebody's life. And so that led me to follow different mentors, different courses throughout, where I had the opportunity to work with an automotive company that was based here out of Houston. Followed those leaders to work for a children's brand called Unleash Brands, which honestly was like the perfect timing because I had just had our first baby. And then was given the opportunity to take a step further in leadership, which has brought me to 5-star franchising. And so it's been just a great journey throughout. I think I've brought in about 230 different people into business ownership. And we're able to keep relationships with a lot of that, which has just been a blessing as well. But that's what's brought me here today.
I want to get things kicked off because many of the people listening to us are interested in business ownership. And I want to get your perspective about what is to you the advantage of going into franchising rather than starting a business from scratch.
Yeah, I think that honestly, the biggest thing is there's intrapreneurs and there's entrepreneurs. So the true entrepreneur is somebody who they want to create everything from scratch. They want to kind of think of it like trying a new skill for the first time. Like they're okay failing and getting right back up and charging because they're in complete control of every decision that's made. Intrapreneurs, they thrive in franchising because they want to be in business for themselves. They just don't really want to be by themselves. And so they reduce the level of risk by really investing into a platform or a system where the processes are hammered out. There is additional marketing support. There's peers and their fellow franchisees that they can bounce ideas off of. So they really love the community and the structure that can come often from a W-2 or a community, but they still have the autonomy to really dictate how their schedule and their success looks. So it's kind of that perfect pairing between the two.
I'm curious because so many people think that they want to be an entrepreneur. And so is there any kind of test or quiz or something you take people through to really identify if they are going to be successful in the franchising model?
Yeah, there's a couple of things. So one of the first things that we do on every intro call is really figuring out why. If you're mad at your boss, that's a really bad reason to buy a business. And so it's looking at, I miss time at home with my kids. I can't hit my financial goals. I just keep getting passed up for promotions, things like that, where their future is out of their control. And so if that why is big enough that you go, hey, if you found another job that could increase your income, would you keep it? And they're like, oh, yeah. Okay, they are not risk adverse to take that step. So I think that first discussion is really crucial. I think outside of that, I also look at things, we call it the decision criteria list. Like, what does the ideal business look like? And hearing what they describe. If they're, I've talked to people who are like, this sounds great. It sounds like all I have to do is show up and you do the marketing and you do the operations. Immediate red flag. Because what we want to hear is, I'm really excited to get into my community and work on the marketing. I'm really excited to visit with customers myself. And so you hear it a lot more in their why, in their goals, and what is attractive to them versus anything that is high risk. I would say risk aversion as a whole is always kind of a red flag, or I need somebody to tell me what to do. I'm not much of a self-starter. I also like to do an exercise called the bell curve, because obviously every industry has one. And we walk through, here are the 4 things that put you into the bell curve. One of them is traits and attributes. And then we walk through each of them and go, okay, so where do you see yourself? Immediately, because bottom 20 is their business happens to them. They don't happen to the business. High analysis paralysis, slow decision making. If they're like, I am very slow decision maker, I don't love being in control, we'll also tell them, hey, that's totally okay. This probably just isn't going to be the best fit for you, which also saves them a lot of pain down the way. So those are a couple of the things that we'll do throughout the process to really help decipher if business ownership is the right fit, if franchising is the right fit, and then the third would be, is the brand the right fit for them?
So based on your experience and when you've observed in the last few years, like what makes a successful franchise or a successful investment, a successful franchisee versus someone who gets in? And I hear you talked about trades, but I'm curious if you have done your due diligence and they have done their due diligence and they get and invest into that franchise, what is the differential that makes it or breaks it for them?
Yeah, I think for them as people, their ability to follow the system is crucial. Like, this is a massive investment into the system. Do not buy the system if you do. It's kind of like buying a race car. Like, drive it around the track before we switch out the tires or the wheels. It doesn't mean that you don't make tweaks, but if you fix everything right at the beginning and nothing works, then you don't know what it is and you're naturally going to blame the system. So follow the system. Marketing and driving the business. Top performers are not afraid to invest to be able to build more, right? And so, like, scared money doesn't make money. If you're not investing in marketing, you're foolish to think that more money is going to be coming in. The ability to recruit and train talent, I think, is also really key. Even in small, like, a lot of our franchisees, they're sole entrepreneurs, but their ability to scale is dependent on their ability to bring in the right person, teach them and uphold to the systems and processes as well. So time is a finite resource. You have to be able to multiply that in a certain way. And then last is the attributes. A top performer is going to be decisive. They like data, but data to make a decision, not to live in it. They are very plugged into the system. And that's in 2 ways. One, they're not afraid to give back. Kind of that rising tide floats all ships. Our top performers are often some of our best validators because they're like, what do you need? How can I help? They're also the first to ask questions. So they're humble enough to know that I don't know everything. And then last is that ever growth mindset. Like, we have a top performer who does 3.7 million. No one's nipping at his heels. But every year he's like, how do I get better? How do I tweak this? Because he's got a goal that's bigger outside of just a ranking. And it does come with a healthy level of competition. I think you look at any sales organizations, the top performers are fairly competitive. And then I would say too, their why is bigger than their what. Meaning, like, I'm from Wisconsin, there's a massive snowstorm right now. So a lot of people could say, oh, well, it's snowing, so I'm just going to stay inside. Top performers are going to go, great, what type of admin can I hit today? And so they're maximizing their time because they do know that there's more to do. So I think regardless of the system, like, that is who's going to thrive in there versus anybody else. And same thing, like, backgrounds, regardless, almost nobody ever has. Like, I had an automotive friend. Nobody came from automotive. I have home services. Almost nobody's in that category, but the traits are the same, regardless of all the brands.
That was going to lead me into my secondary question is, do you find certain industries, especially in the franchising space, have a higher success rate for first-time franchisees versus others? And also, as a secondary, where do you see the trends going in the franchising space?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think we've never personally owned a business, my husband and I. So if we were to step into it for the first time, I would want to lower my risk at the beginning, even though stepping into business as a whole. So I'd be looking for no brick and mortar, low employees, low cost of goods sold, because everything else is within your control, meaning it's dependent on your outreach, your abilities, and it's not market dependent. So for example, you see a lot of restaurants fail. Well, that's because it's high labor dependent, high cost of goods sold dependent, and high rent dependent. So I think for anybody getting in on the front level, I would try to reduce my OpEx, my operational expenses as low as possible. So that way everything can build. Typically, those are not going to be the sexy businesses, though, just so we're clear. Like I have a passion for children. I love children's-based brands. If I was buying it for the first time, I would be more hesitant personally because I know the operational expenses. So I would steer away from passion into the business model to help with that. You can always sell that business and buy something bigger, but you've got to start somewhere. So I think that was what I would recommend. I would also recommend something local. Meaning there's a lot of, we'll call it non-owner operator businesses that are out there. I would have a really hard time being in Houston and having a business in Dallas for my first one, maybe my seventh. And so starting local, starting small, starting smart would be the recommendation. I think anything with you'll see a lot of growth right now in the wellness and the fitness side of it, just because people do continue to invest in themselves. And so I see a lot of new brands coming on for that. I also see a lot of the golf tracks and virtual golfing side of it. I will say they're having a huge boom in the industry. There's a great opportunity. You'll see some of the highest turnover probably in 5 to 6 years, just because of some of the potential fads that are there. Really what we're seeing as a major source of discussion within the industry is anything that AI cannot replace. So home services, for example, is actually projected to grow the strongest and the fastest in the next 5 years. And that's why people are looking at it going, people are staying in their houses because the market is where it is. It's not replaced by AI. You don't necessarily need a degree or a certificate to be able to do a lot of these. And so we're seeing huge amounts of growth in the home service space because of it.
Christy and I work with businesses that sometimes ask us, what would it take for us to expand our footprint and start franchising, right? And so in your opinion, when a brand decides it wants to franchise or expand its footprint, what needs to be in place operationally before they can even start thinking about it?
Yeah, it's funny. I was just at the Emerging Franchise Conference last fall, and we were talking about this exact thing. I think that if you can write everything down that you do, hand it off to a semi-stranger, and they can read it and go, oh, I get it. While you step away, then you're ready to franchise. Outside of that, you're going to be limited to that. So that operations manual is step one. I think of it as we had my parents come in right after we had the first kid, and we made a house guide because I was I don't want questions. I just want you to be able to operate off of what I give you. That is what franchising is. You're entrusting somebody with this business that you have built to follow your operations and replicate your success. And so that is step one. And then I also think doing a bit of a self-evaluation to go, what am I really good at? What am I not? And who do I need to have on my team to help me grow? A lot of brand new emerging franchisors, they go, okay, well, I'm operations and I'm accounting and I'm marketing. And also now I'm FranDev, and time is a finite resource. So I think that is a big piece. And then along with just be honest and realistic with your goals. If you go from year one entrepreneur to starting franchising, you don't want 40 franchisees the next year, because those first 3, your only job is to make them raving fans. They are going to be your biggest advocates, your biggest validators, the foundation of your item 19. And so if you can nail the basics, it's a lot easier to grow in years 4 to 5. But there's a reason why a lot of brands don't get to 100. It's just because they either are taking the long way, which is good, or they went way too fast and then they disappear. And so operations manual and correct scaling would be the big one.
So based on what you just said, I'm curious, there are a lot of brands that come and go out there, even in the franchising world. So what have been some of the stories you've either experienced or heard of a brand growing way too fast and actually not succeeding in that conversion to being a franchise?
Yeah, it's interesting. So you typically don't see it for a couple of years out. So for example, one of the brands that I was not a part of, but they were part of the same platform. They were not an emerging brand by any means, but they had just a handful of units, and then they actually outsourced their franchise development. And so with that, they had a really put together sales team that knows how to move units. And then they had their operations, which was originally part of, the original franchise. Well, they start selling like hotcakes because there's wide open white space and you don't have to be in the brand and you only need one or two employees. And then the operations team is sitting there going, oh, shoot, we cannot hire at this pace. We don't have the real estate set up to be able to help get these units open. We don't have the training to be able to accommodate this new type of business model because they did have a lot of owner operators. And they look 2 years down the road, they had over 200 locations on what we call a sold not open list. And a lot of those units never ended up opening. And so as the franchisor, having to go through and try to shift them to other brands or help them open or help them exit. And it just caused, a world of trouble for both the franchisor, but really for the franchisees. They took, savings upon savings to open this up. And it's just heartbreaking to see that go away when they could have just scaled correctly.
And continuing down that path, I'm also curious because one of the things that, especially in the post-exit space, when in a traditional business, when you're not franchising, you can exit and sell to another business. And one of the things that we care about is maintaining the culture and the purpose and the mission of the organization across the path. You are dealing with people buying into a brand, and some of those people have different values. They have different backgrounds. They lead differently. How do you grow that brand that has a set of values and really impact the carrying out of everything that the original brand started with into all of those different franchises that are coming in?
I love that question. So this is actually something I think we do really well at 5-Star. So 5-Star Franchising is a home service platform. So not only do we have 5-Star Franchising, but we have our 6 brands that we own underneath that all have their individual home offices that support our franchisees and the franchisees underneath. And right at the home office level, our one of our co-founders, Scott Abbott, he actually does an interview with every home office team member. And so what you hear throughout the interview process is, these are the 5-Star drive values. And they are driven, real, innovative, vital, enthusiastic. Here's what they mean. Which one stands out to you and why? And you hear that on the first, second, third interview, all the way to Scott's. And so it doesn't matter the position, whether it is 5-Star or brand specific, that interview occurs. And I, as somebody who hires onto their team, Scott has said, hey, they don't know our core values. We're not hiring them. So on top of that, then when we're talking to franchise brokers or consultants who give us leads, we go, hey, let me talk you through the 5-Star core values. And here's what they look like. And here's how they're demonstrated. We look for this in our ideal candidates. And when our candidates are on the phone with our team, we go, hey, let me tell you about our 5-Star core values, what that looks like and how that presents itself as a business owner. And then we do that at the Meet the Team Day, which is our final step. And we ask them, hey, which is your favorite? Why is that? And then we do our awards. Yes, there's top performer awards, rookie of the year and all that, but we actually do drive awards both for our home offices and our franchisees. And we do this on a quarterly basis. And so we involve it in every discussion because regardless of, belief systems or actions or side of it, if we are fundamentally agreeing that this is who we are and how we're going to operate, even if we pivot directions or new leadership comes in, it's still to that same expectation. And it just allows us to get there a lot faster. And they're also not like wonky. They're very easy to remember. And so we've never had a candidate who's like, I don't want to be enthusiastic about what I'm doing. I don't want a company that's innovative. And so when they understand the core values, the core purpose and how it plays out, everybody's been able to get on board pretty quick. But it also lets us shift people out really quick, whether that is, I see it often on the employee side, but on our franchisee side too, that if it doesn't resonate, it's a good way for them to go, hey, nice people, not my people. And I'm going to go a different direction.
Let's focus back on you. So you got into franchising and this has been your career. What are the pieces that you find are most challenging in this career field?
I think early on it was saying no. And what I mean by that is having these people come through the process and you hear their story and you're like, I love you as a person. And I still remember that one of the first people I ever awarded, they were great. It was somebody who I think he had retired from journalism. The wife had just sold her nail salon. I was like, oh, I love these people. And I flew myself to their grand opening on my own dime, like surprised them. And then they closed a year and a half later. I was like, what happened? And although they were great people, they were not great franchisees. They didn't want to follow the system. They didn't want to market. I went, oh, okay. I need to start, like your no's are just as important as your yeses. And so I really got a dose of that when I moved into Christian Brothers. And we only awarded about 70% of the people who made it to the final interview. Like there was 12 voting members, and if 2 said no, it was a no, and I made that phone call. So I think the piece that was struggling is being like, I love you. I hear your heart in this. I think you're a great fit. I think culturally, however, the risk is too high in your candidacy to let you invest $500,000 into this brand. And when you're in your young 20s, that is a really tough conversation to have with somebody who's 40 and 50. I also think connecting with people very early on in my career was a little challenging because I was young 20s, not married, no kids. And I think going through the stages of life in the industry, that's also become a lot more easy to connect on others when they're telling me about missing kids' soccer games. And I was like, oh, okay, same versus, 23-year-old Missy talking to people about their life.
So at which point in your life did you realize that you were actually playing a major role in shaping other people's lives?
I think there was always elements of it because you need to see them open, then you need to see the fruits of that. I think working at Christian Brothers was probably one of the biggest. And what I mean by that is we had a franchisee who came through the process and he's like, I'm on the verge of divorce. Like if I don't find a solution to be home, I'm not going to have my family. And then to watch him grow into, I think he's at 3 shops now, but it was 2 when I had left. And I had met him and his wife and his kids at a volunteer event at their shop. And just seeing how that has changed, or even like another franchisee here in Houston inquired my first year, we didn't have anything open. Inquired second year, and we did finally have an opportunity. And it was right as I was pregnant with my first, and he was like, hey, our son just outgrew all these clothes. Like, can we bring these in? And just seeing the relationship there. He also now just opened up his 3rd store right by his house. And just watching like him and his wife, Jessica, they're like the healthiest they've ever been. They're finally traveling. I know what he was making when he came through the process. I know he's making way more now. And I've actually visited with them about brands at other companies that I've moved into because he's in the financial position. It's a lot of that side, but I think there's even the relational, like he was one of the first 10 franchisees I awarded at Pinot's. He actually is who married us at our wedding. So we are still great friends. And hearing like, hey, I learned so much during this journey that's applied here as they've gotten into other businesses. Like the lifelong relationships, I think is also a win because you're a lot closer to the wins for that family.
You've hinted a few times now that through your career, your life has changed, including being a mom. Being that you are sitting in a corporate role, I would love to hear some transparency around how it has been being a mother working in corporations. We commonly hear often on our podcast about people talking about how challenging it can be to get your, paternity or maternity leave approved and be able to get the amount of time that you need. So I would just be curious kind of what your experience has been around that and any advice you might have for those that are currently or potentially in the future going through that.
Yeah, it's funny. I remember starting at Christian Brothers and my team member was like, hey, get short-term disability. I was like, okay. I don't know why. And she walked me through, she's like, hey, if the maternity policy is this, so you need to do this to set up. And that was like the biggest blessing because 2 years later, I had fulfilled that side of it. I will say I've been very lucky. I think it's on twofold. One, I have worked for leaders that have full families that understand the importance that their wives make for them. And they have been they've been very willing to work with me. They've been an advocate for me. At the same time, nobody that I've ever worked for will tell you that I am quiet. And so advocating for what I needed was just as important. So I think that would be the words of advice as well as like, A, look at your policies earlier, even if you're like 2 years prior to wanting to have kids or starting a new company, but like be vocal about what you need. Don't tiptoe or be ashamed about it because it's also like a very normal piece and we're not fitting into the norm. Like this is the norm. So I think that plays in. I didn't have a great PTO or maternity policy for my first child. One was created about 2 months before at my second, in which a lot of that, once again, is from advocating, from being vocal about like, we need this, we need this. And then I think also just holding really firm boundaries with that. My husband is great. We are equal partners in the parenting side of it. If the kids need to go to a dentist or a doctor's appointment, we can split the responsibilities. But at the same time, like I'm not missing Mother's Day brunch and I'm not missing Thanksgiving sitting in the tiny chairs eating terrible turkey with the kids every year. And I will block that off in my schedule. And so sitting down with leaders, and for me, once again, I've been very lucky. It's not been a difficult conversation, but just to say, hey, if you want me to show up here, I'm going to show up here as well. I very rarely will take a phone call after 5 o'clock. My team knows this. I advocate for them to have their family time because at the end of the day, like all of the jobs, all of that can go away. What you have at home is there to stay. And so I think creating firm boundaries, advocating for yourself, and then just keeping people in your corner as to why it matters has been a tremendous help. So I don't typically feel like I'm having to balance now. I also have tons of friends that have kids that do not have that same experience. And so being in franchising, being in a sales role, it does create some flexibility. Not everyone is as lucky.
I'd love for us to ask those same questions to men at some point in time. But continuing in that vein, and we just talked about your children, what do you want and hope for them to learn by watching your career growth and your career in general?
I think it's different for both of them. And I will say one of the similarities is I want them to realize that hard work gets you where you need to go. Like nothing's going to land in your lap. And so have the conversations, be able to push to win. Both of our children are fairly competitive at a young age. We'll see how that plays out long term. I also I never knew that franchising existed. So I think I'm not saying they have to go into franchising, but look into other things that might seem like the oddball. I know tons of people in sales. This is a completely different realm because of it. And so I think looking outside the box, our daughter is like a spitfire. So she is 2.5. And I want her to never have her light dimmed because of what she thinks she's supposed to be doing. So I think for her, it's very much don't let somebody do that. Now with our son, he's very quiet. He's so smart, but he's very reserved. And I'm I want you to come out of your shell because I think when you do that, you can be your authentic self in corporate America, but you have to make that decision. And so it's different just based on their personalities because I think they're going to end up in vastly different paths otherwise.
Where do you see yourself 5 years from now? What's your personal vision?
I think it changes. I have told it depends. If it's a bad day, I tell my husband, I was I'm just going to be a stay-at-home mom. I would not want to do that probably, 2 weeks in. And he knows that just doesn't fit my personality. But I've just recently moved. Well, it's been about 2 years into this role and I really love it. And I feel like there's way more to learn. And so I'm working really hard not to be too eager to change things if you can maximize your learning opportunity in the moment. So Down the road, there's one more step in the career, which is a chief development officer, which is just seeing a little bit bigger side of it. So that's certainly a part of the long-term vision. The other side of it is recently I've had the opportunity to move into some leadership roles within the Women's Franchise Committee within the franchising space. And so just finding a way to create a bigger path forward for women within that, being able to serve the industry of which has given so much to me, I think is also a very primary focus over these next couple of years while learning to get ready for that next step.
I've wanted to kind of delve into the world of sales because you are one of the rare women who is actually, diving into it and holding it and being a good steward to it, because women don't like to sell very often. And so I'm curious about how your confidence around selling as well has evolved over the years. And as you're thinking about your growth, what message do you want to send out to women who, many of them we've talked to over the years, who are not comfortable specifically selling in a value-based manner, meaning that they have a discomfort at really accessing the value that they provide to others?
Yeah, it's interesting. So I did sales in college. I did like sales competitions and I loved them because I was like the weird like stage kid who didn't mind if people were staring at them. But I was so prepared going in that I was never nervous. Now, getting out of college, I had a different job that I did not like, and my confidence went all the way down, which I probably needed some humbling, for being honest. And so it's picked up throughout the side of franchising. But I think what has made it very successful, and this would kind of be the words of advice as well, is franchising is unique. First of all, I think that sales in general is something you do for somebody. It's not something you do to them. So think about it. You go into a clothing store and you're trying to buy a dress for a wedding. Like you want somebody to be like, that is beautiful. You look great. And if you're going back and forth between the $250 dress and the $200 dress and the $251 looks better, like you want somebody to hype you up and talk you into it. You don't leave going, oh, well, that person just took advantage. This sales is, it's no different. So with franchising, what's so unique, and I think this is women's superpower within it, is the number one hat that you wear as a trusted advisor. So you're listening to learn and not to respond, which I think is a patience thing that not everybody has. And so when you're hearing them go, I miss my kids, I miss my wife, and they get to the end and inevitably fear happens because that is normal. And you go, hey, can I be honest with you? You told me this at the beginning. Is that not true? And like, it's genuine versus salesy, because I'm not saying that men do not care, they do, but like we care because we care about that stuff. And so that I think is what has led me to be successful in this role. I've also had mentors who have challenged me and pushed me on just like skill sets and things to add on to be more succinct within that. And so I think not being afraid to have the hard discussions, because you want somebody to have that with you. This is the second biggest investment they're going to make outside of a house, usually, sometimes bigger. And so you want to be that advisor. You want to have the hard discussions. You can connect on a different level. Also, depending on the brand, primarily you see a lot of the business owners are men. Well, guess what? Their women also control that decision. And I would say probably half of the ride-alongs I do with men, they forget to address the wife, because not because they're dismissing the feelings, but they're just having a conversation with the main person that's name is on the CRM and going like, hey, Christy, I'm sure this impacts you as well. Like, what do you think about this? And so just small things like that, I think, are so vastly underestimated that have led to success within that. But even sales outside of franchising, the ability to just listen, to actually hear what they're saying, or sometimes what they're not saying, just based on body language, that is something I think women actually have a higher propensity for often.
You have described 100% of my experiences buying a car.
Yes. We just bought one in December. Same thing. And I was like, do you guys understand that I'm writing the check here? But thank you. It's my vehicle. We told you that, but clearly we didn't hear it.
It is shocking how much it still exists today. And being with that, I would be curious, do you have any stats on like the percentage of solely women-owned franchisees?
I don't know from like an industry standpoint as a whole. I would tell you that like one of my brands is a or a mosquito abatement company. It's pretty 50-50, which I was surprised because like no little girl dreams of that, but they get the lifestyle side of it. Gotcha covered. It's actually significantly less, which I was also surprised where it's probably about 30% specifically women owned. We see a lot of couples as well. I have a brand called Card My Yard. I would tell you that is 75% female because it was started by two single moms, or not single moms, but stay-at-home moms. And so they just resonate with the brand. So I do think it varies based on brand. We're seeing a rise as people look for flexibility. They look for additional income. But I wouldn't know from an industry standpoint as a whole.
I'll probably push back on the mosquito remediation brand because I know if my sister were to invest in a specific business, that would probably be one of them because anytime she walks outside, she's victim number one.
Yeah. Well, this is like our youngest is allergic. So like it was a no-brainer from that standpoint. It's a great business model as a whole, but yeah, they get the lifestyle side. I will say that number would be higher if we calculated in married couples where the woman is the primary. So I would say it's probably only about 30% like solely male owned. Everything else is going to be a couple where the woman is the main point of contact.
What do you think that is? What do you think? Because I noticed that in terms of you telling us stories throughout this podcast, you were mentioning a lot of men who own franchises and their stories. But what do you think is the number one factor that prevents women from making that investment and going into something that, ultimately, when you're thinking about business ownership, franchising is kind of de-risking it because you have that proven model and that proven process. And so it's easier to get into it because you don't have to figure it out from scratch, as you said. So in your experience, what's that thing preventing us from buying into it?
I think there's two things. So one, if you look at the vast majority of like married couples across the US, the husband is typically not the sole income provider, but usually the primary income provider. And so when and they also handle the investment side of it. And so when they're looking at investments or they're looking at a change, that is typically the lever of which they're going to lean into first. I think the other side of it is just like if I look at diversifying my time, it's between work and the kids. And so I think once again, he's equal partner, but I think if he looks at diversifying, he's like, well, I can do work and this because the kids are at home, they're taken care of. And so I think when we look at this spreading of our time, I don't always think that our thoughts go to what else can we be doing financially. I do think like if I have spare time, I'm typically spending it with the kids versus trying to grow something else. And I am very driven. And so I think it's probably a mix of that, of just how we want to spend our time. And franchising is not incredibly well known. Like I even remember sitting in my first interview and they're like, what franchises do you know? I was like, Subway. And there's so many out there. So I think there's probably also a lack of marketing and just visibility into the female side of the country. And really, I think you almost have to change the messaging to be like, you get the flexibility, you get the lifestyle, and you get the income. I don't think people always see it that way, which is such a shame because it is a big reason why people get into business ownership as a whole.
Outside of work and being a mom, what is something that is just yours?
I can't even say just mine because I feel like it involves other people. Massive Mahjong fan. Like Mahjong has taken over my personality in the last 2 years, but you do that with other women. So I can't say it's just mine. I always try to pick up like a hobby a year. And so Mahjong and embroidery have kind of been the two things. I also I love just spending time with my friends, like getting together, having a glass of wine, laughing until our stomachs hurt. And so that is at least like at once every other week, if not more, is definitely something that is a priority for our household.
That is so funny. There is a list of like 15 things that women, once they become moms, end up doing. And I think we've kind of inventorized it. It was one of our startup questions at one of our dinners that Christy and I host. So mahjong was definitely one of them. Walking with a weighted vest.
Walking, burn boot camp every morning.
Right.
It's my me time.
Yes.
But even with that, it's still very social. So I don't do well just like sitting by myself. Like reading is not my thing. So it's got to involve other people.
That's awesome. As we're wrapping this up, we love to ask that last question of, with everything that we've talked about and to benefit our listeners the most, what is the one lesson that's kept you going forward and growing your career over the last few years?
I would say like you can't take care of other people if you don't take care of yourself. And so I think investing in yourself, being very protective over what you need allows everybody else to thrive. It's never at the sacrifice of others. And so it is okay to be selfish because it just means you're better for everybody else around you. I would say that's probably my word of advice.
And going one step deeper, what's one action someone could take to start creating that space for themselves?
I'd say carve out time and protect it. And what I mean by that is like, I don't want to be at the gym at 5 a.m. to be very honest, but like that is my time. And so if that means I go to bed at 9:30 to make sure that that happens, I'm very protective over that. I'll say no to things if it prevents me from going to that. I won't start meetings too early if I can't shower and get ready. And so like that is a non-negotiable. And even on Saturdays, it doesn't matter if the kids are up. Like my husband's like, I've got it, like go take care of them. And so that might look different depending on somebody's hobby or side of it. But just like if it's not scheduled, it might not happen or you might work over it. And so I would just hold firm boundaries around that timing. No different than most people block off lunch. It's just as important in terms of like maybe fueling your body, but fueling your soul.
We were just talking not too long ago about what would happen to us if calendar apps became non-existent, and how do you hold those boundaries? So
our internal clock, hopefully.
Well, yeah, let's not manifest that because I'd be lost without my Google Calendar. Missy, it's been incredible chatting with you and learning more about the world of franchising. It's always something that we end up talking about, but it's great to have the expert in the room to chat about it with us.
Appreciate both having me on.
Absolutely. And for all of you listening out there, as usual, stay badass, and we'll chat with you next week. Thank you so much for listening. We hope you enjoyed this episode as much as we did recording it. If you like our show, please rate us, drop us a review on your favorite streaming app, and we'll catch you on the next episode. This was the Badass Women in Business podcast by Christy and Aggie.